One man, one dying mother, one chance to fight back. They judged him by his clothes. They ignored her cries for help. But fate doesn't forget kindness. When the past crashes into the present, masks fall and justice strikes harder than anyone ever saw coming. Stay for the story that proves true worth is never worn on the outside. The hospital doors slid open with a hollow thud. Jack gritted his teeth against the sting of the cold lobby air as he guided Mary, his frail mother, toward the front desk. Her thin frame sagged against him, her breathing ragged and shallow. Jack's boots echoed on the shiny floor, his oil-stained jeans and faded jacket drawing quick glances from the waiting room. He didn't care. All he cared about was the woman clinging to him, fighting for every breath. At the reception desk, June, a young nurse with perfectly manicured nails, barely looked up from her monitor. Jack cleared his throat. "Ma'am, my mom, she's having a hard time breathing. She needs help. Now." June finally raised her eyes, giving Jack a once-over that made his skin crawl. "Insurance card," she asked, voice devoid of warmth. Jack shifted Mary's weight slightly, struggling to hold her upright. "We'll pay cash. Please. She can't wait." June sighed, exaggerated and loud, like she wanted everyone to hear. "Fill this out," she said, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "Take a seat. We'll call you when it's your turn." Jack stared at her, stunned. "Ma'am, I don't think you're listening. She's 82. She can barely keep her head up." June tucked a stray hair behind her ear, unimpressed. "Everyone here's got problems. You'll have to wait like everyone else." Mary coughed violently, a dry, wrenching sound that echoed across the lobby. A few people glanced over, then quickly looked away. Jack's hands tightened into fists. "I ain't asking for favors. I'm begging for some human decency." June offered a tight, dismissive smile. "Sir, we have protocols. If it's an emergency, you should have called an ambulance." Jack's jaw twitched. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "By the time an ambulance gets here, she could be dead." "For a heartbeat." June hesitated, then shrugged. "Take a seat." Jack bit back the 1,000 things he wanted to shout. Instead, he guided Mary to a battered plastic chair in the corner. She slumped heavily, her face pale as chalk. "You hold on, Ma," Jack whispered, crouching beside her. "You're tougher than all of them put together." Mary managed a weak smile, squeezing his hand. "You always did know how to sweet-talk your mama," she rasped. Jack laughed softly, but it cracked halfway, broken by helplessness. Across the room, the nurses whispered behind their screens. Jack caught fragments. "No insurance." Probably another charity case. He stood up, blood roaring in his ears. Jack walked back to the desk, planting both hands firmly on the counter. "You need to get a doctor. Right. Now." June didn't flinch. "You raise your voice again, sir, and I'll have security escort you out." Jack opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a young male nurse passing by slowed, frowning. "Something wrong here?" the young nurse asked, voice even. Jack pointed at Mary, whose head now lolled dangerously to the side. "My mom's dying while they're making me fill out paperwork." The young nurse's gaze sharpened. He looked at Mary, then back at Jack, then at June. "I'll get someone," he said without hesitation, already moving toward the emergency wing. June's lips thinned, but she said nothing. Jack watched him go, heart hammering, a flicker of hope fighting against the rising tide of fury. He looked back at his mother, her chest heaving, her face growing grayer by the second. "We're not invisible, Ma," Jack whispered. "Not today." But deep down, he knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Kyle, the young nurse, moved swiftly through the double doors, disappearing into the emergency wing. Jack stood rigid, staring after him, heart pounding like a drum inside his chest. Mary's breathing was getting worse. Each gasp sounded thinner, more desperate. Jack returned to her side, kneeling. "Stay with me. Ma, just a little longer," he murmured, brushing a shaky hand across her forehead. Seconds later, Kyle reappeared, pushing a wheelchair toward them, a determined look etched on his face. "Sir, we need to move her now," Kyle said, voice steady but urgent. "We've got an open bed in triage." Relief flooded Jack's body. He helped Mary into the chair, her body limp as a rag doll. Kyle turned to June, who stood stiffly behind her desk, arms crossed. "I'm taking her back," Kyle said firmly. June's voice sliced through the air, icy and precise. "You're out of line. Kyle, she hasn't been processed." Kyle didn't blink. "She can't wait for paperwork. She's in respiratory distress." June's smile was razor sharp. "If you bypass intake without authorization, it's your job on the line." Jack's head snapped toward her. "You care more about rules than saving a life." June folded her arms tighter. "We care about doing things right. If we let everyone jump the line, chaos follows." Kyle tightened his grip on the wheelchair. "I'll take that risk." June's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll answer to admin." Jack stepped between them, his voice low but vibrating with anger. "You ever been the one sitting there, watching someone you love turn blue while some desk jockey talks about forms?" June's expression didn't flicker. Kyle jerked his chin toward the hallway. "Let's go. Now." As he began to wheel Mary away, a security guard appeared from the far end of the lobby, alerted by June's silent summon. "Is there a problem here?" the guard asked, hand resting lightly on his belt. June gestured coolly. "This patient hasn't been cleared. Protocol violation." Jack took a step forward, placing himself between the guard and Kyle. His hands were open, but his stance was iron. "My mother's dying. If you're here to stop someone saving her, you're part of the problem." For a tense moment, no one moved. Kyle locked eyes with the guard. "She's going to die if we wait. You really want that on your hands." The guard hesitated, then slowly stepped back, muttering, "Not my call." Kyle didn't waste another second. He pushed the wheelchair through the swinging doors, Jack following closely behind. As they disappeared into the emergency wing, Jack looked over his shoulder, once catching June's cold, furious stare burning into his back. He didn't care. He wasn't here to win arguments. He was here to save his mother. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Kyle rushed Mary through the swinging doors into the triage wing. Jack jogged beside them, his heart pounding in time with his boots slapping the floor. Bed 3's open. A nurse called out from down the hall. Kyle nodded sharply and wheeled Mary toward the curtained-off area. Jack hovered, watching every move, every adjustment of oxygen tubes, every beep of the monitors. Then a sharp voice sliced through the noise. "What the hell is going on here?" Jack turned just in time to see a tall man in a crisp suit storming into the triage. His presence commanded instant respect. Even Kyle straightened instinctively. It was Harris, the hospital director. Kyle stepped forward first, trying to explain. "Sir, the patient was deteriorating in the lobby. Intake delayed, but Harris wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on Jack. A long, charged moment passed. "You," Harris said, voice rougher than it had been seconds ago. Jack blinked, wary. "Yeah, what about me?" Harris took a step closer, studying him. "You were there, 20 years ago. The plant fire." Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't like being remembered. That was a long time ago. "Mister?" Ain't important now. Harris shook his head slowly, disbelief all over his face. No, no, it matters. You pulled me out of that wreck, saved my damn life. Kyle looked between them, confusion flickering across his face. Jack shrugged, uneasy. Didn't do it for medals. You nearly died yourself, Harris said, voice thickening. I never even knew your name. Jack said nothing, his eyes dropping to Mary, who lay pale and trembling on the stretcher. Harris followed his gaze. He stepped closer to the bed, his expression shifting from shock to horror. This is your mother. Jack nodded once, stiffly, without hesitation. Harris turned sharply to Kyle. She gets top priority. Every resource she needs. Full cardiac team on standby. Kyle nodded immediately, already moving to grab additional equipment. Harris wheeled back toward the entrance, his voice snapping like a whip. And someone find out why she was left sitting in the goddamn lobby. Jack watched it unfold. Stunned, Harris returned, voice lower but burning with intensity. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. Jack shifted uncomfortably. I don't need sorry. Mister, I need her breathing. Harris's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite grief. You'll have it. You have my word. Across the triage, a wave of urgency rippled. Mary was being attended to now. Properly. As she should have been from the start. Jack stood back, his muscles still coiled tight, his mind struggling to process the sudden shift. For the first time that night, he felt something crack through the heavy shell of anger, hope. June stood stiffly behind the reception desk, arms crossed, pretending to busy herself with a stack of papers. But when Harris stormed into the lobby, his eyes dark and burning, the room seemed to freeze. He walked straight up to her, the heavy silence parting around him. June, Harris said, his voice low, dangerously controlled. Explain to me why an elderly woman in respiratory distress was left to rot in your lobby. June didn't blink. Sir, she didn't have insurance. Standard protocol requires. Harris cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Protocol, his voice cracked, loud enough to turn heads. Protocol is not an excuse for negligence. June straightened her shoulders. We have rules for a reason. Sir, we can't just break them every time someone walks in looking desperate. Jack, standing near the triage doors, heard every word, his hands curled into fists. Harris took a step closer, towering over her. You think this is about desperation? This was about life and death. You judged a man and his mother by their clothes and their wallet. June's cheeks flushed red, but she held her ground. I followed procedure. If I made exceptions, there'd be chaos. You already created chaos, Harris thundered. You gambled with a woman's life. The waiting room had fallen utterly silent. Even the security guards edged away, pretending to be invisible. June's voice faltered slightly. Sir, with respect, you weren't here. I'm here now, Harris snapped, and I'm fixing what you broke. He turned to the stunned onlookers, speaking loud and clear, effective immediately. Nurse June is suspended pending a full investigation. Any further obstruction of care in this facility will not be tolerated. June opened her mouth to protest, but found no words. Her face crumpled as two supervisors quietly approached her from behind. Jack watched, emotion boiling inside him. Not pride, not satisfaction. Just the raw, aching relief of knowing. Dean leaned against the wall outside the emergency room, rubbing his temples. The adrenaline was still thrumming through his veins, but now something heavier sat on his chest. Lena approached slowly, Jamie sleeping soundly in her arms, the oxygen tube taped gently to his nose. Doctor, She started, her voice hoarse. I don't know how to thank you. Dean shook his head immediately. No, if anything, I should be thanking you. Lena frowned in confusion. I don't understand. Dean studied her face, tired, worn, but fierce with love. The same fierce heart he remembered. Even if she didn't realize, he spoke quietly, almost reverently. 20 years ago. There was a car accident on the 405. A woman pulled a boy from a burning wreck, stayed with him until the paramedics came, saved his life. Lena's eyes widened slightly. My mother used to tell me about that day. She was that woman. Dean smiled, something aching and bittersweet in it. I was that boy. The hallway seemed to shrink around them. Lena gasped softly, clutching Jamie closer. But I never thought. Dean chuckled under his breath. A rough, worn sound. I was too young to really thank her properly. And your mom, she disappeared before anyone could get her name. Lena's throat tightened. She didn't want praise. She said if you can help someone, you do it, no matter who they are. Dean nodded slowly, as if hearing the echo of a long-forgotten lesson. She saved me. She gave me another chance, and now I can give it back. Lena wiped her eyes, overwhelmed. I wish she were here to see this. Dean's voice softened. Maybe she is. In some way. They stood there a moment. The chaos of the hospital swirling around them, but not touching their small, sacred space. Then Lena whispered, barely audible, I thought maybe no one saw us. No one cared. Dean's gaze was fierce. I saw you. I see you now. A nurse came rushing down the hall, clipboard in hand, but paused when she saw Dean's expression and backed away, sensing the weight of the moment. Dean straightened up, voice growing harder again. And I'm making sure everyone else sees you too, starting with that woman at the front desk. Lena shook her head quickly, alarm flashing in her eyes. You don't have to cause trouble. Dean's jaw tightened. This isn't about causing trouble. It's about doing what's right. His voice dropped lower, steel threading through it. People like her, they think kindness is weakness, that if you don't look a certain way, you don't deserve help. I'm going to make sure she learns otherwise. Lena clutched Jamie tighter, her heart thundering, and for the first time that night, a small, fragile hope flickered inside her. Dean stepped into the waiting area, his eyes scanning the room, nurses and patients scattered. But he had one target, June. She was behind the reception desk, tapping her pen absently, eyes flicking between the computer and the clock on the wall. Her eyes didn't even rise as Dean walked straight toward her. Lena and her son are to be prioritized. Starting now. Dean's voice cut through the air like a knife. June glanced up slowly, her expression bored, unfazed. That's not how it works here. Doctor, you know that. She leaned back in her chair, as if this was just another day. Policy's policy. Dean's eyes locked onto hers. There was no smile this time, just raw authority. I don't care about policy. June raised an eyebrow, a sharp, cruel smile forming on her lips. You think you can just waltz in here and change everything. That's not how it works. Dean. Dean didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his voice lowering, cold. Here's how it works. A life is at stake, and you let a mother watch her son suffer because of a piece of paper. His eyes flashed. That's not something I'll tolerate. Not in my hospital. June's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. You're crossing a line. You know what happens when you make enemies in this place. Dean took another step forward, leaning across the desk, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. Do you think you can intimidate me with your threats? June. He shook his head. I'm not here for power games. I'm here because a child was dying. And you chose to ignore him. June shot to her feet, now matching his intensity. Her voice rose, defiant. You don't get it. Do you, if people like her walk in here and think they can just bypass the system? It'll all fall apart. I follow the rules. That's the only thing keeping this place from becoming chaos? Dean scoffed. Chaos, you call leaving a sick child to wait orderly. You're so focused on rules that you forgot why they exist in the first place. To help people. June's fingers curled into fists, her face reddening. You're making a mistake. She spat, her tone venomous. You think you can just waltz in and undo everything you think you're better than the system. Huh. Dean didn't back down. His voice was ice. The system. The system is broken when it lets people like you dictate who lives and who dies. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And people like you should never have power over anyone's life. A tense silence hung between them, thick with hostility. Dean's chest rose and fell slowly, but his eyes never wavered from hers. June was silent for a moment, her eyes flickering with something like fear, but she quickly masked it with another fake smile. You think I'm scared of you? You think anyone here cares about your personal vendetta? She glanced around the room, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're nothing. Just another doctor with too much time on his hands. Dean straightened up. His words, however, were sharp, every syllable cutting through the air. Let's see how long your rules hold up once everyone hears about this. I'll make sure the entire board knows what's been happening here. His gaze was lethal. And June. You're done. June's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't. Dean turned, cutting her off with a single gesture. I can. And I will. He turned and walked away without a second glance, his footsteps echoing in the now silent room. June stood frozen, her hand still gripping the edge of the desk. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched, but there was nothing she could do. As Dean exited the building, his mind was clear. He had made his choice. He had stepped into the line of fire, and he wasn't backing down. Inside, June was left standing at the desk, staring after him, realizing too late that her carefully constructed walls of power had just cracked. Jack stood just outside Mary's room for a moment, his hand hovering over the door handle. He took a breath, steadying himself, then pushed it open. Inside, Mary lay with her eyes half open, her breathing shallow but steady. Jack moved to her side quickly. Hey, Ma, he said softly, pulling a chair closer. Mary gave a faint smile. Jackie, you didn't leave me? Jack chuckled under his breath. Never planned on it. She squeezed his hand, the skin paper thin against his rough fingers. They didn't treat you bad, did they? Jack hesitated, then shook his head. They tried, he said, but not everyone forgot who we are. Mary closed her eyes briefly, a tear sliding down her cheek. You always fought. Even when you were little. Jack grinned. Guess I had to. Ma, you taught me. A quiet beep from the monitor filled the room for a beat before Mary opened her eyes again. You saved me today, she whispered. Jack leaned closer, his voice breaking. No, Ma, you saved me. Every day. Outside. The sky was just starting to lighten, hints of orange and pink bleeding into the gray. Jack stayed there, holding her hand like he had when he was a boy, the weight of the long night finally lifting off his chest. Whatever battles came next, he knew one thing for certain: he had already won the one that mattered most.